And immediately I would like to mention also that those of you who are standing there, if you want to take a seat, it's possible in the auditorium. Just leave this room here and there will be somebody outside to guide you to this auditorium. I am Juha Ketolainen from the National Agency for Education, EDUFI. And I would also like to extend the warmest greetings of our Director General Olli-Pekka Heinonen to all of you. He is currently on mission abroad. We are here in front of a very complex theme, the global learning crisis and our role in solving it. I wonder what can be a more challenging and demanding task, but at the same time also inspiring, rewarding, and noble. And now it's my great pleasure to invite Minister Li Andersson to give the opening words for our seminar and also food for thought for our work ahead during these following 2 days. Minister, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, dear participants, dear friends. Firstly, a very good morning to all of you. You are most warmly welcome to this networking event on education, development cooperation, and Finland's role, visibility, and impact in solving the global learning crisis. As Minister of Education, I feel it's my duty to start with a few figures concerning this theme. Despite considerable progress, we know that globally, more than 750 million adults are still illiterate, and 2/3 of them are women. More than 260 million children and youth are out of school, and with the current trend, 220 million of them will still have no access to education in 2030. This rate of progress is too slow. In order to achieve the Sustainable Development Goal number 4 on education, we need 70 million more teachers by 2030. Equality gaps are huge, not only between countries, but also within them. And worst of all, we know that more than half of all children and youth, in some countries up to 90%, are not learning the basics and basic skills, whether in school or not. This staggering finding challenges the entire concept and purpose of school and education. It means that the crisis of learning is real and that it is global. At the same time, achieving the UN 2030 Sustainable Development Goal and Agenda greatly depends on the entire knowledge sector, from preschool to tertiary level. It's therefore crucial that we succeed in meeting SDG 4, since education provides the basis for critical thinking, for science and innovation, which all are essential in solving the existential problems of humankind, such as the climate emergency and the loss of biodiversity. Dear friends, education and training also provide the best safeguard against exclusion, against insecurity, and lack of prospects. Inclusive, quality education is a very powerful equalizer for the whole of society. Education is not only a fundamental human right, but it's also pivotal for active citizenship, for creativity, for independent thinking, and for making informed choices. So in short, it makes sense to invest in education, especially the kind that works. This holds true for all countries, and I'm happy to say that here in Finland, we have managed to reverse massive and short-sighted budget cuts made by previous governments. We are again investing in education at all levels, and we're also strengthening the role of education in our development policy and in the global cooperation that Finland does. Dear friends, you're all here today because you're engaged in educational development, and you have experience of working in the global south. Regardless of your background, you share a passion for learning, and you believe that Finland can make a difference in solving the global learning crisis. There's a few things I want to tell you. First, Finland strives to be a respected and a wanted partner. We wish that countries from all corners of the globe could learn from our experiences, and we wish to learn from those of others. Second, Finland has expertise to offer. The strength of our education system is widely acknowledged, and our international partners have been interested to learn more about it. From pedagogical practices to special needs education, curriculum planning, quality assurance, and many other things, we have a lot to share. We're strong in sector-wide policy planning and management, and we stress equality in all of our actions. Some people say that Finland has the world's best teachers. I certainly like to think that way. Our teacher education is top of the class, and most teachers have graduated with a master's degree. Through north-south collaboration between higher education institutions, others can also benefit from the expertise of our education faculties when developing their own teacher education models. Vocational education and training is another field with endless possibilities for cooperation. I believe that the global community has yet to fully realize the importance and the potential of VET. At the moment, the global enrollment rate is only around 20%. At the same time, we have more young people looking for employment than ever before. Finland's flexible, modular-based VET, or a so-called hybrid model, might provide also lower-income countries with something to consider. It's not by chance that almost 50% of Finnish youth opt for a vocational education after completing basic education. And also something I've noticed in international debates where I have had the possibilities to participate, that the attractiveness of vocational education and training is something that a lot of policymakers are thinking about in many countries around the world. So how we could increase the enrollment rate among youth when it comes to vocational education and training. International collaboration is naturally also in our interest, as learning is always mutual. Finally, in order to better meet increasing expectations and make use of synergies, we have in many ways intensified the strategic cooperation between my ministry, the Ministry of Education and Culture, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. A multi-stakeholder working group completed its work earlier with a solid set of recommendations, including the need to increase Finland's visibility in global discussions concerning education and the global learning crisis. The UN system, especially UNESCO, as well as the EU Commission, the OECD, international development finance institutions, and multilateral funding mechanisms are also fora where Finland needs to have a stronger voice. But of course, we also need to be present on the ground. I am happy that we now have education specialists working in roughly 20 missions and embassies abroad, including in South Africa, India, Argentina, Mozambique, Afghanistan, Nepal, Ukraine, Palestine, and Myanmar. Additionally, our specialists are also working at the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank through secondments. And some of you are also present here today. Dear colleague, to conclude, Finland has the potential to make 1 + 1 = 3. For a greater impact, it's necessary to pool our resources and to pool our expertise. That's why I'm very happy about the topic of today's event, which is multi-stakeholder cooperation. It's always useful to share concrete examples of collaboration and cooperation between education providers, higher education institutions, civil society, and the private sector. All of you are important in your own right, and by working together, you can make an even greater impact. I hope that you, during your various workshops and sessions, that you also could think about working models for public-private partnerships. Your discussions will provide valuable inputs and also help us focus our joint efforts in the future. Thank you so much for the important work that all of you do, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Minister Li Andersson. And when finding solutions to the global learning crisis, World Bank is a key player there. And our next key presentation is by Hanna Alasuutari.
Good morning, everybody. It's so nice to see so many of you here today. I know the room is full, and we also have another room there where other colleagues are looking at the presentation. I'm very honored to be here today. So my name is Hanna Alasuutari, and I work in the World Bank in the Education Global Practice. I'm based in Washington, D.C., and I'm actually very happy to be in this very room today because we had a wonderful event in May 2018, this very event. I'd like to actually extend the thank yous for the Foreign Ministry, for agency, as well as for the Minister of Education, Culture and Science. Did I get the name right? I hope I did. You have to correct me. There are far too ministries that we also collaborate, and I'm maybe too seldom here in Finland to make it all right, but you will correct me, I'm sure, if there are any issues that I might say wrong. So today I've been asked to talk about the World Bank as an actor in solving the global learning crisis and links to Finland. So one link that I already mentioned was the fact that we actually make sure that there are those encounters that international actors actually get to come to Finland, get to really be with educational professionals and get to know about the Finnish system. Those are the best links that we can hope for. I think also our university sector at the moment is very successful in having more international exposure inside of Finland, and I hope we are able to be even more innovative about that in the future. So before we go on, I hope I can quickly make sure that everyone are awake. How many of you have some experience with working with the World Bank? You can raise your hand. I'm sorry I can't see to the other room. Okay, that's great to know. I also want to know how many of you know the structure of the bank very well? Couple? Okay, that's lovely. Okay, I know about that too. How many of you have heard about the Learning Poverty and Learning Target launch, which was recently done? Okay, we have one or two. Okay, couple of people. Thanks for letting me know. So I'm going to utilize the time available for that. I'm also going to count on you, Annika, to tell me, you know, when I have maybe 2 more minutes left. So I'll be sure I'll be on time. Okay, so here you can see the brief summary, what I'm going to talk about, and hopefully I can focus it the way for you as an audience today. Okay, so really the brief background about the bank. We are very big. The World Bank is very diverse, as you can see. There is staff from all over 170 countries. We have 120 locations. The institutions are mentioned briefly here. So it's good to remember that the World Bank is a bank. However, there is variety of activities. It's not just a lending institution. There are a lot of grants that we implement. There is also such a service, what we call RAS, which is Reimbursed Advisory Services, which is really technical assistance. Variety of countries come to bank to. So we are talking about high-income countries, some in European continent, others in Middle East, and so forth. So it's just good to remember how the bank is. And then the twin goals, if you've ever heard about the bank, you know about the twin goals. So that's one perspective good to reflect if you want to collaborate with the bank and to remember that in the circles where you are active. So it's to end extreme poverty and also promote shared prosperity in a sustainable way. Huge goals. I also wanted to take the quote from our web pages. So those of you who want to go and find out more about the bank, please do visit that very web page. Bank is the largest financer of education in the developing world, and it works in about 80 countries and is committed to Sustainable Development Goal 4. I think our Minister, Li Andersson, here in the morning really emphasized the fact that we really need to work as a global community within this very, very serious situation. The learning crisis has been acknowledged for a long time already. Now it's really the moment to see what can various actors really do and what can we do together and how can we make sure that we all are informed about each other and make best use of the links that are there. I want to remind you all about World Development Report on education. Finland was one of the actors who was very much involved. That did happen before I started my work in the World Bank. I've been there about 3 years now. So after that, there was a launch of Human Capital Index. How many of you have heard about this? Okay, couple, so I'm not going to spend too much time on that. I think it's a very powerful instrument. It's looking at the human capital in a bit different perspective. It really is a powerful tool for the governments to understand that what are the gaps that they could have achieved if they would have invested more on education and health, for example. There's a lot of information about this. I think the countries that are so-called early implementers have really a lot to share already. And it's one of those tools that the World Bank uses within its policy dialogue with a variety of countries. Now I'm getting to the education global practice, finally. So the objective is really briefly mentioned here. It mentions that we really would need to work towards everyone with the skills needed to be productive citizens, lifelong learners. Yes, it has the productive citizens and lifelong learners in the same bullet point. I think it's very good to also look at the current way the bank works and look inside of the institution better and see the opportunities there as well. Quality learning experiences there, what does it mean in variety of contexts? We are in a different universe perhaps in Finland compared to some of the countries we work in Sub-Saharan Africa or South Asia, and I could give some more examples. I know there's a lot of people in this room who know what I'm talking about, so I don't need to go into those, providing you more experiences, examples on that. I emphasize the last point there is systemic wide reforms at scale. It's been really proved by a variety of research as well as experience that it won't be a sustainable change if it's not a systemic change. So perhaps another thing for the Finnish actors here present today to consider, how can you be part of that systemic change? Sometimes it involves that you make sure you network, you collaborate with a variety of actors. Sometimes it might be the fact that you're going to do the slice of a big cake, let me say like that. And you're going to do that slice well, and you're going to make sure others understand what's happening and what you're doing. The 5 principles that summarize the role really, and their principles for education policies and programs to support policy dialogue in unique country context. I think this yellow text really describes the way the bank works, just to emphasize that a little bit more. We always work with the governments. So we can't really do anything what the government is not willing to go towards. However, there is a lot of opportunities within the negotiations and dialogue and collaboration. There is that term that often you hear when the bank is mentioned, that there is a convening power. And I think it's important to also see how you can utilize that convening power within the context that you work. Finland being also, very actively involved with the bank in so many ways, I think it's really important to see strategically what are those ways that you can find out what's going on and really help each government, each country the best possible way in that particular context. So systemic reform was already said. I want to emphasize also inclusiveness and equity. I am working as a global lead for inclusive education in the education global practice at the moment, and I have to say the bank has been asleep for the 25 years, but it is now awake, I think. We made a commitment in the Global Disability Summit. The bank has committed to make sure all its education projects and programs are going to be disability inclusive by 2025. We don't only consider disability, however, we do focus on it in a certain specific way, which you as an audience again know the reason why. Most of the groups within disability are really the most marginalized, and of course it links with the poverty, with gender, and I could go on. So I also encourage you to have a look what's going on in this particular field. I think the bank staff at the moment really benefits on expertise and experience of people who really are educational professionals in developing inclusive societies. So it's not only education, though education is very important, but also looking at other sectors and how we can ensure collaboration. Also, measurement is important to the bank. We also do follow the whole government approach, and technical design, operational capacity, and political alignment is important. And behind these principles, I'm taking you to the education approach, which is really presenting you the 5 pillars that are supporting the operationalization of education policy into practice in unique country context. So these different pillars really are supposed to be the guidelines for our staff and our partners to work in different all education levels. So it talks about the learners being prepared. So early childhood education is one area. Of course, we can consider this in many ways. How can we make sure that we actually support the early childhood education mechanisms that might already be there in the local contexts? How we make sure that since the child is born, there is that stimulation happening, and so forth. I think one area maybe where Finland could even do more. Then we have teachers, one area where Finland has a lot of experience to share, and it really calls for teachers at all levels to be professional, valued, and effective. So we do need to also remember how to make sure that we will support the countries in selecting the best possible teachers they can in their countries. How can we make sure that there is also continuous professional development? One area where Finland, I think, lately has also done things differently because it has realized that that is something that we need to do. Professional education needs to be there for everybody, not just for those who will go there voluntarily. Then classrooms are learning spaces, really calling for relevant curriculum, learning, instruction being on place. We are looking at very particular, even quite technical perspective for this very element at the moment, just to see how can we get some of the basics really under the radar of those responsible for educational policy and practice. You can see that safe and inclusive schools is one of the pillars. Only this morning, I think, when I was looking at the news, I heard that in Finland we actually have less police than in any other European country. And because of that, we still don't have enough support for violence that happens at home. The bank is actually dealing those same issues. And I think it's one perspective that we as educational professionals working in international context should remember. Like, how are we dealing in my own country with these issues? What is not yet perfect? I think that's the perspective that's so powerful when you work with international partners and countries. So you have that type of, understanding that actually we don't have any perfect systems in the world, but we have systems that need continuously improvement. And of course, the variety of system is also important to understand. Well-managed education systems are not too much emphasized. I think we could have more focus on leadership than we do at the moment. So now I'm going to jump into the reading target and learning poverty that I briefly mentioned about. I've got 2 minutes. Okay, I'm going to be really quick. with this, because you are able to look at this on the web pages more. The Sustainable Development Goal is mentioned here, and really the essential questions are asked. How can we make sure that this is really happening, what we are aiming for? The reading target is really, the learning poverty is looking at this. We actually today have 53% of children in low and middle income countries who cannot read and understand a simple text by age of 10. This is the data that has been put together with the UNESCO Institute of Statistics and the World Bank team. There is a number for Finland too. It'll be good for Finland to have a look at that and analyze how was the number, really how did the team come up with the number. We have had some, reviews with various countries I work with, and so far the result has been accurate. So we can see the learning poverty numbers here. Sub-Saharan Africa, 87%, South Asia, 58%, Middle East and North Africa, 63%, LAC, 51%, ECA, Europe and Central Asia, 13%, and then East Asia and Pacific, 21%. These are big numbers, and I think this is getting us to one of the foundations, one of the fundamental issues in the learning crisis. And I know, again, there is a lot of experience and expertise in Finland that you can really, the context where you work in, it'll be good to make sure that you reach out to people in the World Bank also working with this. I don't have to argue for you why reading. You do understand. This is the actual target announced. It is aiming at making it half by 2030, and then hoping to make it zero in any context. And the actions are mentioned here. You're going to get the slides later on, so happy to elaborate those more in one-to-one discussions once we have more time for that. I emphasize the target is set, however, each country has to define its own path eventually to eliminate learning poverty. So how can you really look at what World Bank is doing? How can you follow and engage? Those on Twitter, have a look. When you are following education global practice of the World Bank, you get to know about the most recent issues that are happening both globally and country level. Those of you who are present in the country and region contexts, I want to emphasize the current structure of the bank. So we are under the human development. We've got the Vice President, Annette Dixon, who was actually visiting Finland also, I think, July this year. She oversees global director and regional directors who at the moment are in the same level in our structure. The structure, by the way, just changed a couple of months ago, so we are getting used to it still. The practice managers are in these units, so we have 3 regions in Africa, and the rest you can see. And then in addition, I do want to emphasize our global solution and thematic groups. They have been working within the education global practice within this format for about a year now. There are some older groups. Again, global leads like us are going to be very instrumental if you're interested within specific themes in these areas. Also, I was asked to go for Finnish Experience, Expertise, Networking and Collaboration, and initially I planned that I will have a little bit more time on that. However, I think our minister was already emphasizing many perspectives, and I think I've also referred to some of the things that I think are very important for a country like Finland. The Finnish story is very interesting. I think we are past the PISA myth era. So the kind of approach that people are either in favor or against the Finnish system, because it's just something that doesn't happen. It's a miracle. You cannot really make an opinion about that. So visits and interactions really help us in breaking those myths. And as I already said, I think the education system, which continuously is being improved, teacher education and all the rest I have mentioned in here. Institutional collaboration, I think, needs extra perspectives, and also I think it's important for Finnish university sector to see that how can we actually make sure that it's part of all the disciplines, not just education. Strategic long-term engagements are powerful. We have one at the moment being prepared, which is about a program called Coach, and it's about teachers' continuous professional development. I'm very happy to see so many engaged people in the room. Feel free to reach out if there is anything I can do to help in networking and collaborating in the role that I have. I do also emphasize that the direction to the bank teams is always through the government collaboration. There are some specific ways also that can support the collaboration, but do reach out to the teams within the countries you work with, and do reach out also for us within the headquarters. Thanks very much for everyone, and enjoy the 2 days.
Thank you very much, Hanna. A very nice good morning to all of you also on my behalf. I'm Annika Sundbäck, and I have been chairing the planning committee for this seminar. Now, before giving the word to colleagues from the Ministries of Education and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I'd like to just briefly bring some messages from EduFi and the planning committee. So obviously, we were very positively surprised by the activity of all of you in submission of session proposals for this seminar. And we see it in the number of participants here today as well. So we're very grateful. And looking at the session materials received yesterday, it's clear that there is a wealth of experience and knowledge in this group here today and tomorrow. So please make use of this occasion for dialogue and communication and networking. We have chosen to focus on multi-stakeholder collaboration due to a few reasons. We all know that Finland has a very strong education sector expertise, but we are a small country in a global terms with limited resources, and we cannot afford to work in silos. So in our perspective, we really hope that in all actions related to solving the global learning crisis, there should be a national added value attached to it and some kind of spin-off available for several entities. Secondly, the development cooperation financing architecture, as we know, does not directly promote multi-stakeholder collaboration. But even though this is the case, or especially that's why we have chosen this seminar, so that you will be able to look at complementarity and ways to work together. And finally, we believe all successful partnerships are based on mutual trust, respect, understanding, and benefits. And the prerequisite for all of this to happen is that you know each other and you know about each other's strengths. And that's why this forum provides a forum for meeting between different stakeholders. So that would be our message. And now let's continue with the messages from the Ministry for Foreign Affairs. So I invite Mariana Sall, and then to be followed by Ministry of Education and Culture, Jaana Palojärvi. Please.
Dear participants, good morning to you all from my side as well. High-quality education and training are one of the priority areas in the Finnish government program, not only for Finland, but also for our development policy and cooperation. The working group, which was mentioned just by the minister, the working group for strengthening Finland's global role in education, gave recommendations to intensify the collaboration between all actors, namely the government, civil society, and private sector in the education field to better address the global learning crisis. So today we are walking the talk by jointly organizing with the Finnish National Agency for Education, the Ministry for Education and Culture, Foreign Affairs, and Fingo this seminar, with the aim of identifying and sharing experiences on successful multi-stakeholder collaboration. This is important as the Ministry for Foreign Affairs is taking steps to develop comprehensive country strategies for the next programming period. This will require coherence between activities and instruments, as well as stronger synergies and interlinkages between various actors. The discussions today will feed into that process. And just as Minister just said, it makes sense to invest more in education through our development cooperation. This is why the Ministry for Foreign Affairs is planning to increase development cooperation funding to education sector. Finnish education expertise is also sought by many multilateral development agencies. In order for us to be able to offer competitive and attractive services for those international organizations, we also need to pull our resources together. Therefore, today experts from the civil society, educational institutions, private sector, and public authorities have come together to discuss this issue. The theme of the seminar covers all educational levels from preschool to higher education and research. The program is built around thematic parallel sessions, how through multi-stakeholder collaboration we can better support education sector in different countries. The specific topics vary from education system reforms, curriculum development, inclusion, and teacher education to mother tongue teaching and lifelong learning, just to mention a few. I hope that these 2 days will provide a lot of insights and new ideas on how we can become a stronger global actor in addressing jointly the learning crisis. I wish you an interesting 2 days of seminar. Thank you very much.
Dear friends, dear colleagues, I'm Jaana Palojärvi from Ministry of Education and Culture, and I'm extremely pleased to be here. And I'm also extremely pleased to see so many of you here. It was, at least for me, it was a bit of a surprise that the interest towards global learning crisis and multi-stakeholder cooperation is so huge in Finland. And this has been a very, very long story, actually. We have been starting to discuss about global learning crisis and what could be the role of Finland in providing solutions and providing Finnish approach to this issue for, well, we started about a year ago, a bit more than a year ago. And I would say that during past year and half, we have had extremely good discussions with all stakeholders, with NGOs, with universities, Universities of Applied Sciences, other educational institutions. And what has been risen in all of these discussions is precisely multi-stakeholder approach. A need to more intensive collaboration, need to more strategic approach. And when we are speaking about multi-stakeholder cooperation, I think it's not just that we are trying to support and encourage the cooperation in the field, but we also have to find very Finnish solutions to public-private cooperation. And I think the Finnish model is pretty good and pretty well functioning. Our bureaucracy is pretty low, and there is really, and I can assure on my behalf, and I guess I can use also the voice of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, that we are very open for cooperation, very open for new ideas, and of course, because we are Finns, very open for new innovations and practical solutions. I think that innovation and trying to find practical solutions to very wicked problems is very typically Finnish characteristic. And this is something I would very much hope that this day would also bring up some practical solutions, new innovations, and also answers, and maybe thinking a bit out of box as well. Our minister started her intervention by mentioning some of very, very striking figures, like which I would still like to repeat. 750 million adults who are still illiterate in the world. 260 million children and youth still out of school. And even those who are in the school are not learning well enough. I mean, think about these figures. It's very easy to pass these millions of people, but still it is striking. In case of Finland, I think we cannot compete with money. If we're comparing Finnish possibilities to compete with the donors who are very much well off, and I really would like to use this opportunity to thank Ministry of Foreign Affairs that they are now increasing, hopefully, the funding for education within the development cooperation, and this is definitely needed. But still, money is not the issue which Finland is known of in these circles. Finnish brand, Finnish knowledge, Finnish know-how, and Finnish reputation in education is still pretty solid. It's not linked to the PISA results only. Of course, PISA is one of the reasons. But if we look at all rankings where Finland is on the top of the world, competitiveness, other educational rankings, even happiness, which is always a bit weird for us Finns, that we are the happiest country in the world, but still we are there. And I think the education and kind of a social network and social security and equality, which are very, very much present in the Finnish society, are one reason for this happiness. We have very good safety network in Finland, and education and quality of education is certainly one part of that network as well. But how we are using this reputation which we are having? Are we really using it? The voice of Finland is heard when we are saying something about education. How we can use it better in solving the global learning crisis. And this is also one of the key topics of today, I would say. How we can kind of provide new approaches, how the voice of Finland is even better heard. Bilateral cooperation, definitely. We have extremely good network of Finnish education experts in Finnish embassies at the moment. 17 countries, if I remember correctly. Part of them are sent by the Ministry of Education and Culture. Part of them are working within the development cooperation framework by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. But still, in 17 countries, education experts. And besides that, in addition to that, very many Finnish embassies are very much into education, which I would happily give credit. So we should better maybe use this network and even intensify that cooperation and make that network more, let's say, fluently interact with the Finnish society. Finnish universities, Finnish training institutions and educational institutions and NGOs. And I know that there is, for instance, I'm looking at Ina, who is one of our experts in South Africa at the moment, and there are others. So I think this is also the opportunity to give some feedback and new ideas to be taken to the field as well. Multilateral cooperation, UNESCO network, World Bank. Thank you for Hanna for excellent intervention. And other international organizations. It was quite striking to me when Ritva Reinikka made her survey 1.5 years ago, when there was one remark that nobody actually mentioned European Union cooperation and development cooperation when she was making interviews. And that is pretty striking, isn't it? How we can use the possibilities of European Union foreign assistance better. Now, when we are going to have very good commissioner, I hope. So that could open also new avenues for that sort of cooperation. How we can make an impact, how we can make a difference. Please, ideas, approaches, expertise is very much needed in that field as well. And finally, I would like to conclude by repeating a bit what Annika and my other colleagues said already. We are a small country, but we have very good tradition in cooperation, and we have very good tradition in networking. So we should use these opportunities to create kind of a critical mass to make a difference also in solving global crises. So with these words, I would like to wish you very good discussions, hopefully also concrete ideas, thinking out of the box, new innovations, new proposals, even wild ideas. So please do have good discussions and please find new partnerships today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariana and Jana. So now it's time to move from theory to practice and to the wild ideas. And we are very grateful now for welcoming representatives. We are moving into the panel discussing inclusion in Ethiopia and the Finnish input, and also how to increase impact. And we are very happy to welcome also representatives from Ethiopian partners. So we don't only have Finnish speakers here today. So please, if I can ask you to take a seat behind this table, because that's because of the streaming, so that your faces can be visible in the streaming camera. And I also invite Professor Elina Lehtomäki from University of Oulu. If you want to continue, Elina, here, I will come over to help.
Dear colleagues, it's a pleasure to be here introducing the panel discussion for today. My name is Elina Lehtomäki. I come from the University of Oulu, and I have had the pleasure to work with many of these colleagues around this table today over quite many years ago in Ethiopia. One of the first tasks there was to map the resources. That's what I valued, mapping resources, who are there, which organizations are doing and what. So I can claim that I have been collaborating with all these organizations that the panelists today do represent, and it's a pleasure to chair a session like this after some 15 years of time. And I can still see the work is continued in different ways and by the multi-stakeholder collaboration. And I would like to introduce you, starting from your left-hand side. We have here from the Embassy of Finland in Ethiopia, responsible for education. I would prefer to have some light, please. Thank you. And we have Esetu Forka Ferrahu, who is from the Embassy of Finland and essentially following up all the development cooperation in the field, the main contact at the embassy side when it comes to education sector cooperation. And then next to her, there is Dr. Leena Kaikkonen, who comes from the University of Applied Sciences in Jyväskylä, and she's been involved in this TVET project that we will hear more about today, and leading it from the Applied Science University side. And then next to her, we have Dr. Yishak Degefu, who comes from the Federal Technical Vocational Education Institution and is responsible for the teacher education capacity development program that is conducted there. And then next to him, we do have Abebe Jehualavork-Malle, who has got the doctorate from Finland, from the University of Jyväskylä, I can proudly say, and is a lecturer at the University of Addis Ababa. And he's assisted by Mrs. Chedale, who is working there also in the civil society organization led by previously for a long time by Dr. Abebe Jehualavork-Malle. And then next to Mrs. Chedale, Verahu, we have also then a representative from the Kynnys civil society organization, and then we have Veera Pensala from Kynnys, and next to her we do have Tuomas Tuure, who is the chairperson of Kynnys NGO, or leadership position there. And then next to him we do have the University Students Union representative Syl Salla Mäkelä. So you are most welcome. We have quite many people and we have rather limited time, but I have requested everybody to give very short sort of first points to the discussion so that we really encourage dialogue here, and then maybe have some questions also from the audience in the end. Yes, please. Thank you so much for the introduction.
Good morning, everyone, and excellencies and organizers of this event. Thank you for the opportunity. I am extremely pleased to be here. My presentation focuses on Finland and Finnish actors enhancing inclusive education in Ethiopia. Ethiopia's education policy and Finnish sector support. So under that, we have the education and training policy of Ethiopia, which states that all learners, including those with special educational needs, learn in accordance with their full potentials and needs. Having that background, there is inclusive education strategy, inclusive education master plan, and also there is inclusive education roadmap, which is expected to be approved soon. So having that policy background, what is Finland's role in Ethiopia's education sector? Finland started its support with the training of teachers, inclusive education training, and also following that, Finland provided project support, and it focuses, the support focuses on preparation of inclusive education strategy, inclusive education resource center pilots in several regions, and more other support related to that. financial and technical support to the education sector, which is called General Education Quality Improvement Program, which is actually the biggest program in the education sector. Finland also financially supported the GKIP. What has been done so far? So when we assess that, particular focus has been given to the inclusive education, which is inclusive education nowadays is part and parcel of the sector plan and the sector programs. Teacher training, okay, thanks. Teacher training, special needs education teachers has been trained, and also special needs becomes one of the courses in the colleges of teacher education, and teachers also started to be specializing in inclusive education or special needs education. Allocation of resources for establishment and expansion of inclusive education resource centers becomes part of the General Education Quality Improvement Program, the second part, and now we have the General Education Quality Improvement Program for Equity. Technical assistance from different donors is started coming in for inclusive education, which is complementary to the Finnish support. Policy dialogue is the main part of the Finnish support. We have the technical advisors, the counselors in the embassies that provide technical assistance to the Ministry of Education. Finland also supports or provides technical advice to other programs that are coming into the education sector. Those are multi-stakeholder programs. So we have some results, we have some impacts, but how to improve that impact? So we think that appropriate use of existing human resources, like trained itinerant teachers, should be placed according to their professional ability. Nowadays, in most cases, itinerant teachers are assigned to teach other subjects than special needs or inclusive education. There should also be enhanced coordination within and among the sectors. It's very sad to say that the sectors that should focus on inclusive education are not coordinated well enough. The best example is, for instance, the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Health, and Ministry of Labor and Social Affairs. They don't really coordinate each other. One ministry doesn't know what's going on in the other ministry. Even within the ministries, even with the ministries, it's sometimes, one department doesn't know what's going on in the other department. So that is the limitation we have. And the government sometimes, it lacks to own, some initiatives and systemic change in order also to support all the learners has to be there, because it's inclusion doesn't mean that including only the children with disabilities, but all learners have to learn according to the pace they can do. So what are the concrete measures? We think that the government has enabling environment with respect to policies, strategies, and sector plans. Donors, civil society organizations, and other stakeholders, they financially and technically support in establishing inclusive education resource centers, and awareness is there to some extent at all levels, especially families, communities, schools, and regional education bureaus. Children with disabilities formerly were kept locked behind doors, due to some cultural and traditional matters. Nowadays, children with disabilities are coming to school. So that are some of the concrete measures we have achieved. The biggest success is that although the education management information system data are not timely and sometimes are not reliable, and although the anticipated level of enrollment is not yet achieved, we have witnessed that a number of children with special educational needs are coming to school. That is one of the biggest success. Learning environment and provision of learning materials has improved. Level of awareness has improved, and better attention is given to inclusive education. One witness is that equity has been one of the program priorities of the General Education quality improvement program, and that equity includes inclusive education as its main result area. Focus on equity has improved. What are the obstacles? Yes, we have achieved some things, but there are also obstacles. There is inequity and disparities between rural, urban, and also between the different regions. Lack of coordination among stakeholders and across relevant sectors. This I have mentioned it earlier. This is one of the obstacles. There is also resource limitation and also wastage of resources. There is limited resource to get to the anticipated objective, but there is waste of resources. The example is the teacher trainings. Teachers are not, assigned in their respective teaching. For instance, inclusive education teachers are not teaching or helping the children with special educational needs. They are assigned to teach something else. There is commitment, yes, but commitment sometimes is just words, no more actions. So that is one of the challenges. And the data quality and reliability and timeliness is one of the obstacles. Accountability at all levels is also a challenge. When we come to the lessons learned, we can take system strengthening, capacity building has to be continuous because there is a lot of staff turnover from one department to the other, from one sector to the other, from one region to the other. So the capacity building issue has to be targeted and to mitigate the staff turnover. Experience sharing has to be encouraged among stakeholders so that no one should start from zero. So it has to build up upon what has been done. A strengthened coordination platform so as to avoid overlap of intervention. This is also crucial because when a new development partner or civil society organization comes into the sector, it has to be really coordinated. In summary, I want to emphasize that there is a policy environment favorable. Finland supports the teacher training, project support, financial and technical support to the Ministry of Education and also to other programs. But what we need to do is to improve coordination, and the government also has to own and scale up the interventions, and use of resources for sustainable and systemic changes has to be improved. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And next we have Leena Kaikkonen, or shall we skip over to Dr. Yishak?
I can say briefly.
Yes, thank you.
So good morning, everyone. My name is Leena Kaikkonen, and I'm representing here Jyväskylä University of Applied Sciences, known as JAMK, and especially the School of Professional Teacher Education. We are here now, two projects that we try to present you the practical level of the work, and we will start with the project which is involving here besides me, Dr. Ishak and Dr. Abebe, and then we will give space to another project which is presented by Sylän Kynnys. I try to be very, very brief, saying something about the background or the context of the project. As Elina started saying that there is a strong and long connection between Ethiopia and Finland, and especially I'm proud to say Jyväskylä. Much of the work that was done earlier was focusing on development of basic education, and now the project that we are presenting here is the first project done in the area of vocational education. It was a collaboration between higher education institutions. JAMK was the coordinator of the project, and it was involving also Jyväskylä University from Finland, and from Ethiopian side we had a Federal TVET Institute, which is in a way our brother or sister, so that they are doing the training of vocational teachers like we are doing here in Finland. And then we had Addis Ababa University, which is the long-lasting partner with Jyväskylä University. And as the fifth partner, we had Federal TVET Agency, which is the kind of an administrative level agency in charge of development of vocational education in Ethiopia. The overall aim for our project was to improve, develop more inclusive education for vocational education through supporting the TVET training, teacher trainers in local level, in regional level, and in federal level. And as the outcome, we were hoping to develop especially educational structures of Federal TVET Institute in terms of inclusion. As a kind of strategies, what we had here, that when we wanted to move, we started from, the main idea was improve the teacher educators to be the catalysts for inclusive practice. And even though we talk about practice, we understood strongly that it is not moving into practices only, but we need to also develop the policies. So in a way, the strategies that we had here in the project was that we wanted to have the idea of top-down and bottom-up all the time, that we are moving from local level to regional level to whole country level, moving from individual teachers and students to educational organization and also to educational administration. And we were moving between, according to inclusive index, priorities from inclusive practices to cultures, which in most cases meant changing attitudes and also policies to be developed. Shortly, what we were doing, because the idea was to give people more knowledge and skills in inclusive practices, it quite easily led to idea of different type of trainings. But before the trainings, we had in the project in 5 different regions in the country, awareness raising meetings or seminars or workshops where the main idea was to involve in administrations from TVET education and from TVET schools. And from that, we moved to different type of trainings. The first one being that 15 TVET teacher educators from Dr. Ishak's school were trained as a kind of a key persons who then later on moved to train their colleagues in the institutions and also, of course, training their students. And the other thing was that as we wanted to have the whole country or many regions of the country, not whole country, but 5 regions of the country to be involved. So we had 100 teachers from vocational schools coming to Addis Ababa for training. And these were trained by the Finnish teacher trainers, Ethiopian teacher trainers, and the local NGOs and the University of Addis Ababa trainers as well. And then these 100 teachers were sent back to their schools, and each of them trained 10 teachers, so that we had this kind of a cumulative process here. Furthermore, there was more training for the vocational school managers and administrators and so forth. But I think that I now move this microphone to Dr. Ishak to tell more in details what you did.
Please be close to the microphone.
Yeah, before I speak on the details of the activities we have gone through, it's better to turn to Dr. Abebe so that he can speak a few words about the inception of the project, because the inception comes before the action. So I give the chance to Dr. Abebe.
Thank you very much. Before speaking about the background of the project initiative, I would like to say something about the point that keynote speakers raised. They said that Finland is a small country having a small population. It is true. But I can assure you that you have big and genuine heart to defeat the global crisis. Even though you are small in your landscape and the population. One of the evidence for this is that the support of the government of Finland regarding the enhancement, even the commencement of the special needs education in my country, Ethiopia, trace back to the 1980s. But it is for the first time that the bilateral support agreement was signed between higher institutions of Finland and Ethiopia to initiate the participation of persons with disabilities in vocational education program as of 2018. Thanks again to the genuine support of the Jyväskylä University, the background for this project initiative is my study, my PhD study. I have started my PhD study 7 years ago, around 2012. As one of the requirements, as you know, of the PhD study, I have carried out dissertation or research entitled Policy Practice Gap on the Participation of Students with Disabilities in Formal Vocational Education Program of Ethiopia. The research was organized in 3 articles. That means it was article-based research. All 3 articles have been published in UK and Canada-based scientific journals. So you can check, you can Google, and you can find those articles. And I have tried to investigate the 1994 education and training policy of Ethiopia, how much the policy is inclusive. I have tried to investigate the status of the inclusivity of the Ethiopian education and training policy. Again, I have tried to compare the status of the inclusivity of the education and training policy of Ethiopia with our neighboring countries like Kenya and Tanzania. I have traveled there. I have tried to study their policy, and I have tried to compare with the same situation of Ethiopia. So finally, my study revealed the reality on the ground that the participation of students with disabilities in Ethiopia vocational program is insignificant, almost 0.6%. So this, and also the 75% of participant teachers or trainers also acknowledged that they had no any information how to teach students with disabilities. Almost more than 40% of the participant teachers or trainers also confirmed or noted that they are not found in a position to support inclusive training. Rather, they preferred people with disabilities to be trained in a specialized or segregated institution. So it is because of this finding of my research or dissertation, my friends from Young University for Applied Science, Jyväskylä University, including my professors, came together and started to discuss on the issue. So finally, we have reached the agreement to prepare a project proposal in collaboration with Addis Ababa University and FTI and submit to the ministry in search of financial support. It is in this way that the project was produced. The new project initiative was produced for the enhancement of the participation of students with disabilities in formal vocational education program of Ethiopia. So thanks for the Foreign Ministry of Finland. We succeeded to get the money, and we have started this commendable project as of 2018. So now my friend, Dr. Yisak, will tell you about the progress of the project. Thank you very much.
Thank you, the audience.
Please speak close to the microphone.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
It's a privilege to get this opportunity to speak on the achievements of a small project, and yet not only in our view, but also in the view of external evaluation, the most successful and cost-effective project. As Dr. Lena tried to tell you, the project focused on 3 different major activities. The first one was on awareness raising, the awareness of the society. Specifically, the TVET sector was very low that it was difficult to make this intervention. So we started by making an awareness raising programs in 5 different regions of the country. Immediately after the awareness raising events, we started training teachers in the form of TOT, 100 teachers in 2 rounds, a total of 200 TVET teachers from different colleges have been trained, using, of course, both local experts and Finnish experts. So these teachers, when they went back to their colleges, they again trained minimum 10 colleagues. But mind you, in the activity of training their colleagues, those who have been trained as trainers, they gave us a feedback that their leaders were not cooperative. We, of course, got this information through internal monitoring. As a result, of course, using the leftover money from the project, we organized awareness raising training for college deans and even leaders from the TVET sector. So we gave 2 rounds training for 5 days training to the leaders. Fortunately, after the training, the leaders started to offer support to the trainers so that they can reach out to, of course, to their colleagues. Concerning the intervention in my institution, the Federal TVET Institution, 15 resource persons have been intensively trained. They have been trained for 3 rounds. The 2 rounds of trainings have been carried out in Ethiopia, and the 3rd and last training have been carried out here in Finland. They have traveled to Finland, and they have been trained on inclusion. So these 15 resource persons in FTI, fortunately, they carried out a training of course, our students, which was not, this was not, of course, part of the program originally. We had leftover money, And using that leftover money, we used the 15 resource persons to train 624 graduating students in our campus. So in such a way, the program, of course, have had a greater impact. In terms of course...
Please remember the microphone.
Yeah, in terms of programs, using this project, we have developed 2 programs, the in-service training program and the pre-service training program. Fortunately or unfortunately, because of the revision of the education policy in our country, the roadmap has already, of course, taken one of the programs, that is inclusive education has been part of a university program. That means one course is included in university programs because of the revision of the education policy in our country. So we started, of course, to use one of the programs developed by this project, that is the in-service program, to train, of course, teachers who have not had inclusive education training ever before. So now, to ensure the sustainability of the program, there is a unit in our institute, the training unit, the training directorate. That directorate will, of course, take the in-service model and continue delivering training to the unreached, of course, TVET teachers. So when we come to the impact of the program, though impact assessment has not been carried out, yet the impact is visible with even naked eyes. After the implementation of this program, because of the influence of the program, 2 impaired trainers have been employed in our institution. One in my faculty, a woman with double impairment. She has been, of course, transferred from other training institute to our institute as a trainer. And in one of the other faculties, an impaired student, he has been, of course, employed as a trainer in our institute. So this is one of the greatest impacts that the program had in our country. Mind you, even though all these achievements have been made, these achievements have been made not without, of course, challenges. During the implementation of the program, we have passed through different challenges, the obstacles. During, of course, the offering of the trainings to the college trainers, the situation in the country was unstable. There was a turmoil in the country. So it was under that circumstance that we have delivered the trainings. That was very demanding. Concerning the other challenges, the difference of administrative systems administering a program. Since this is a bilateral program, we faced some sort of challenges in terms of administering the program. So the successes I've already stated.
Please speak to the microphone.
Yeah, I've already stated the successes. The major of all the successes is that the capacity of our institute has been well built. So we can offer inclusive trainings to, of course, colleges, trainers, so that they can, of course, reach out to their students. This is a big challenge, a big success of the program. I think this much would be enough. I have taken too much time.
Yes,
Thank you so much.
shall we move on to the civil society organization? Good to see the power of the project, at least on the leadership of the institute, as we have seen. And now we move to the civil society side of the program, and we have Veera Pensala and Tuomas Tuure from Kynnys, and then we also have Salla Mäkelä from the Student Union.
Hello, everyone. So now we continue with the higher education perspective, but move on to universities and specifically cooperation between universities and NGOs. Well, our project is mainly focused on providing students with disabilities equal access to start the education at the university and also to complete it, so that the universities have capacity to provide the assistance and support that the students might need.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Veera Pensala. I work as an advisor on development cooperation at disability organization Kynnys ry. So we started our project about 7 years ago in Ethiopia with Ethiopian Center with Disability and Development, ECDD. We started at Addis Ababa and Hawassa universities. After few years, we moved on to Haramaya, Gondar, and Mekelle universities. And now, in the beginning of this year, SUL took the lead, got really nice funding from Ministry of Foreign Affairs, doubled the budget, and now is having the lead, but we are still part of it with Kynnys. As you look at the budgets, they are not big. We also pay the salaries, administration costs, and everything for ECDD. But it's not the amount, but it's how we do it. So it's our approach. We only show the universities how we promote, how to increase the inclusion, and then we move on.
Then, to briefly explain our approach to you, we have listed a summary of the key aims and activities that we have. So one of the most important is the university's commitment. Even when our partner organization in Ethiopia, ECDD, is selecting the universities with which we collaborate, they want to know what is the commitment of the university. And the commitment is also shown through university policies and guidelines and budget allocations later on as the universities decide on them by themselves.
At each university, we start with establishing a disability center or center for special needs, if there is not yet one. And in that center, the services, counseling, assistive devices, materials are provided for the student with disabilities. We also we carry out some modification works for the dormitories, toilets, classrooms, but this is all, again, just to show how to do it. We show the universities where to buy materials, where to order the construction work, so that they can continue of their own after.
Then thirdly, we do awareness raising, For university leadership and staff, an example of this would be, for example, that the university lecturers might sometimes prohibit their students who are blind that they can't use audio recorders, which would be important for them to be able to go back to the lectures, whereas other students can use their notes. So these kind of simple changes through the changing attitudes are possible to make. Then secondly, also the students at the universities and the student clubs need awareness raising so that the students with disabilities can be better integrated into the university communities so that they can participate more fully into the academic life and also the extracurricular activities.
In addition, we also focus on students of disabilities, of course. It's important to carry out activities on life skills to increase the self-esteem, self-confidence of students with disabilities, and also we train on the some different kind of trainings like the gender-based violence and sexual harassment, etc. And to increase the employment of the student with disabilities, we also carry out trainings on the CV making and job-seeking skills, etc.
Then finally, we want to encourage the sharing and learning between the universities so that the best practices from each university are replicated in other universities. Then, as we are here to discuss about the multi-stakeholder approach, we thought that it might be interesting for you to see what each organization in this project is actually doing. So ECDD, the local partner, is mainly responsible, of course, for implementing the project, but also is the local expert on disability rights and inclusion. Threshold, or Kynnys, of course, is supporting from Finland in this with its disability expertise. Then the universities, there are 3 of them. They are the main implementers of the project activities in their own organizations. So the universities, and especially their leadership, is crucial to getting the students and the staff to participate in the trainings, for example, and also to carry out the modification works, etc. Then we, SUL, are mainly responsible for supporting the partner organization ECDD, but we also take care of the students' voice in the project so that the students are also heard. And we try to always assist the local student unions to get their voice heard as well, and we encourage the collaboration and sharing of experiences between the student unions in Ethiopia and in Finland. And we also raise our local student unions and their members' awareness on development issues here in Finland. Then society is also mentioned there because as a part of the project, the students with disabilities visit, for example, companies and the broader society to see where they can end up after they graduate.
Okay, and then the final slide, the lessons learned. We still have challenges. Stigma is maybe the biggest challenge still. Students with disabilities are not really accepted outside the university, but not even inside the university, and this hinders our work. So nobody's interested in the disability inclusion, not the students without disabilities, sometimes even the students with disabilities, staff and the leadership. So more awareness raising and collaboration is needed. Lack of commitment from the leadership. This is something we've heard already today. So we still need to increase the commitment among the leadership. Then it's easier in the universities in the lower levels. Small resources. Even though we think that we do good work and it's sustainable and we get results, our resources are limited. 2 weeks ago, I visited Gondar University. There are 50,000 students, and students with disabilities, there are only 100 or 200. And what we can do, we worked in one campus. There are several campuses. We have constructed ramps, but there are so many other, still other premises that needs modification works. Okay, and then the successes. Our approach is sustainable. Now, when I visited the university 2 years ago, they said that their budget from the university is 10,000 euros for the inclusion work. And now I asked, okay, what's your budget now? We don't work there anymore. And they said it's 30,000. So it's nice, it has tripled, but still it's not enough. I think their budget in the universities, they are millions of euros. Universities are well resourced in Ethiopia, so it's really small amount what they use for the disability inclusion. Cost effectiveness, then increased enrollment of the students. In Mekala University, we first had 50 students, then we have 100, then we have 250, but it's nothing if you compare for 50,000 students. And then maybe you take the last one.
Yes, then there has already been learning between the partner universities in Kynnys and ECDD projects, but we are also promoting in this project so that the best practices can be replicated as said. And also we have seen that, for example, already now in the first year of our project, one university has showed interest that they would want to share their knowledge to local schools in their area so that they would also start promoting more inclusive practices.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I would like to have a very brief final word from Tuomas.
Yes, yeah. I always feel sympathy for the panel host because everyone has always important things to say and then you run out of time. I was hosting this event in the last spring and all the guests were politicians, so then the auditor said to me that they are politicians, so they will never stop speaking, so here is a button where you can turn their microphones off.
I rely on the technological assistance here.
Please don't do that to me.
Well, I give you very brief, some minutes. Thank you.
So, yeah, I'm very happy to be here. Also very happy to be with our dignitaries from Ethiopia. Ethiopia is actually one of the first countries where I started to do disability work and mainstreaming little over 10 years ago. And it's actually the African country where we have worked the most through this bilateral cooperation. Just a couple of things that, first of all, I think one of the added values of the work just presented by Veera and Salla has been that university education for disabled people, this is something very few people and very few organizations had supported. And you have to remember that in African context or Ethiopian context, overwhelming majority of disabled people receive no education whatsoever. So the tiny percentage that ends up in the university, so you're basically dealing with the so-called elite of the disabled population already there, and still even most of them have these difficulties. So to create this kind of what the idea of the project was that if you create this kind of student resource center on disability, you can then multiply it. So it has moved from one university to another using pretty much the same concept. So you don't have to invent the wheel over again. And I was asked to say that what have been maybe the challenges, and one challenge to create this kind of multi-sector approach has been that obviously we have major barriers in Finland just inside the development or foreign policy movement, inside the ministries, but also if you look at Finnish universities, African universities, polytechnics, larger organizations, multilateral organizations, or small civil society organization, we are all effectively applying donors from different sources. So it's actually to create this kind of multi-consortium approach where disability actors, education actors, and so can work together, it's been rather difficult. So I think that actually also is a donor issue. The other where I would throw the ball to the donors is that, for example, I would say before 4 or 5 years ago, there was very little that people like us could do in terms of affecting larger actors in the development field, because we have to remember that no matter how grand the project, as Vera and Sola mentioned resources, disability organizations will forever be very small. Disability projects will forever be very tiny. What this means is that the larger education actors or larger developmental actors or larger humanitarian actors would have to use the expertise of disabled people themselves. And through this kind of abilis approach that Mr. Kalle Könkkölä founded 2.5 years ago, we have for the first time I have been able to contribute to a larger projects aside from this. So to create some kind of added value that, let's say there is education lead is with certain organization, let's say the WASH lead is with UNICEF, let's say nutrition lead is with the World Food Programme. What makes disability in a country like Ethiopia, as you know, very complicated is unless there is adequate nutrition, inclusive education doesn't really matter. Unless there is enough WASH and accessible WASH in the school, the inclusive education doesn't really matter. So you actually have, I don't really believe you can cross-sectorialize disability that much. So all of the things would have to come together. So this is why I would argue that we would have to have some kind of disability expertise structure within every single cluster and not to think the sectorial approach. And one thing that I would like to highlight now that Finn Church Aid is one of the organizations present here is that a year and a half ago, one issue that disability community had touched very little has been education in emergencies. That due to the Syrian conflict and natural disasters, there are more and more disabled children living in post-disaster zones. So we went with Finn Church Aid to Uganda, and we have done a couple of evaluation trips since to target what are the issues affecting the lack of education of disabled youth in these areas. So we noticed that number one issue is that the people are too sick or the health of the children is too bad to attend any kind of education, regardless how inclusive it is. And the other issue was that the lack of physical assistive devices. So there was great will in the education cluster and education lead to make all education inclusive. But if you think about the physically disabled children in these regions, almost none of them had any assistive devices. So then the so-called inclusive education approach didn't really materialize because the facilities were accessible, but people didn't have enough assistive devices to use them whatsoever. Because once again, it's different roles. So someone's role is to coordinate devices, and the other person or other organization coordinates education infrastructure. So just in a very brief.
Yes, thank you for the very brief concluding works, I could call them, and I think there should not be any education programs really funded or coordinated or where Finland is involved where we don't also include inclusion as a dimension. So that is the reminder for all of us for the discussions. You're welcome to discuss more and have questions for the panelists here over lunch. So please benefit from the lunchtime. We don't have more time for questions now, but remember that whoever you are, wherever you work within the field of education, you are to understand the importance of multi-stakeholder cooperation and inclusion within your programs. And now some announcements for the lunch.
Yeah, I'm not a politician, but I wish to do a very short comment, even though we have had one extra panelist and too many panelists from the start. But as you can see, I think this is a wonderful example or awful example of how the different funding mechanisms make all these to become different projects. And imagine how much you would have been able to do in terms of impact if this all could be jointly planned. So this is the idea for looking outside of the box. But now please don't leave, because we have some housekeeping issues. As you know, we have many participants, and the EduFi restaurant can only accommodate around 100 of you. So please have a look at the wonderful list of restaurants outside of this building, close to the Hakaniemi Square. Then we will convene here at 1 when you go straight up to your different sessions. And if I could ask now kindly all the EduFi colleagues who are present here to help with the elevators, because the 3rd and 4th and 5th floor are only open to the public. So make sure that you have an EduFi colleagues opening the elevator and pushing the buttons for you. And then there will be EduFi colleagues also welcoming you on the different floors. So thank you and enjoy your lunch.
Hello. How are you? You're not politician. Yeah. No, I was actually. No. I was hosting. I was hosting.
And I hope you've had an inspiring day today, meeting all these different, or hearing about these different initiatives and approaches by a number of actors in the field of education. But the fun is not over yet. We have one final last panel coming up. And if you just allow me one memory down one point down the memory lane. In the previous strategy for internationalization of Finnish higher education institutions, which was from 2009 to 2015, one of the themes that was mentioned was global responsibility. And when I was working at the student movements a couple of years back, this was my absolute Bible that I went to sleep with. So I'm super excited about this next upcoming panel about the Finnish university's responsibility in the global learning crisis. And I would like to start the panel by inviting Hanna Ledemi to come to the front and give us a brief introduction to the panel.
Good afternoon, President Halonen, ladies and gentlemen. It's really great honor and pleasure to be chair of this panel, where is very distinguished panel members who everybody has very long experience in different kinds of issues of sustainability and learning and education. We have had excellent day. So many good presentations and discussions about global learning crises. And today we have now opportunity to discuss what higher education can do and in which way we can contribute in solving learning crises. We have opportunity to have very excellent panel members, President Tarja Halonen, and she is also chair of University Board at University of Helsinki. And then Jari Niemelä, rector at University of Helsinki. Then we have Marja-Leena Laakso, vice rector at University of Jyväskylä. Pekka Neittaamäki, UNESCO chair, also at University of Jyväskylä. Professor Jari Lavonen, chair of Teacher Education Forum and working in teacher education at University of Helsinki, and Professor UNESCO chair Heikki Lyytinen at University of Jyväskylä. I have also opportunity to work as UNESCO chair in education and working at University of Helsinki and University of Lapland. Before we give floor to panelists, I just take some slides. Some of this information have been presented already today several times, but because there can be new people also in this audience, I still repeat something which is related to our theme today. We all know that we have very demanding sustainable development goals for the future. There are 17 big strategic aims by United Nations, which are related poverty, hunger, well-being, health, gender equity, and our environmental issues, air and water, and many, many things which we can meet in our global challenges today. So when we are speaking about these, very often we see how urgent they are. And we can see how much we have to work for sustainable education, for climate change, for air quality, for biodiversity, and many things that are related our global environment. But then we have also to ask, in which way education is related to all of these, and what does that mean when we are speaking about educational and learning crises? Learning crisis has become a couple of years from UNESCO and also from World Bank. And about 1.5 years ago, our foreign ministry, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, called a small working group led by Ritva Reinikka, and I had opportunity to also contribute this report, and Mr. Jukka Tulivuori. We made some analysis how Finland has given contribution to global learning crisis in solving that. And we could find that Finland has done quite a lot. But we could also find that there is a lot what we should do more. And education wasn't so much core issue when we are speaking about our development aid and how we can contribute in different countries that need our aid. And this report is urgently asking in which way we can do more for contributing, solving learning crises. And I think that this our seminar has contributed in excellent way that we have already become more and more aware how we can do things together. Why we have to do so much together? These curves or pillars are from UNESCO and also from that World Bank report, which means that there are huge differences in reading skills between countries. And you can certainly see how low-income countries, how there are very low reading skills. But it's not only in those countries. There are also lower middle income countries, even upper middle income countries, and even high income countries where reading is very low. And that's why we can speak about learning crises. Certainly it's more and more concerning those countries which are low-income countries. That is the case of reading. I'm sorry, about math. I'm speaking about math. So math results are these. Math are very, very much differentiated in those countries. But then if we go to reading, we can see the same result. You can see big differences. I think that we don't need now go those countries, but you can see how big differences are in reading skills. And what does that mean when speaking about people's capability to be active citizens in their own context and in a global world? So I raise especially these two big issues, reading and math, which both are very important basic skills when people are living and working in our world. So by 2030, we have 800 million young people who don't have basic skills. Half of them are girls. And what does that mean? That means the same amount of people what we have in the whole European Union. So it means that It's so much people who can't really read and calculate even smallest things. And that means that now at least 250 million children are at that moment unable to read, write adequately after 4 years in education. So the quality in schools is so low that even though they are in schools, they don't really learn anything. And that means that many children emerge from school totally unprepared for adulthood and labor market. So what does mean learning crises? It means also how dropping out rates from primary level, no opportunities to secondary level, no achieving even minimum standards after being at school, and big regional differences, rural and urban areas, and gender discrimination. These are questions we are facing. And now I would like to invite our panelists and come and discuss and contribute here what we can do together. Please, you are welcome and have your chairs here and then we can start discussing. And we have agreed and decided that we discussed more than presenting any typical presentations. And then we hope that we can get also audience come along our discussion. And my first question is for this very distinguished panel, that what does this learning crisis really mean? What are consequences for our future if we don't do anything? What happens? And President Halonen.
Okay, fine. Thank you. So the question is, of course, that I'm not specialist in education. I have been an adult education activist many years ago when I worked as a union lawyer in Finnish SAK, the center organization, and we had to try to train and teach the very strongly growing membership of the unions in 1970s and teach them that what are the basics that they are able to negotiate and to look after the labor safety and all such kind of the issues. And so I think that it has been for me a good lesson to see also later on when I have been a minister or in UN activities that the fact is that we will face anyway also in the future, the situation where a majority part of the working people have an old-fashioned education, which is not perfect, which is old-fashioned, and it's very diverse. And of course, we can try to do our best with the new generations, but we have also to remember that the new generations will be in the situation where their education will become old-fashioned much faster than what happened with their parents. And that's why I think that if we want to somehow to keep the timetable with the SDGs and then continue the new way of life also always in the future. So we have also to find the ways how people will consider children since the beginning will be curious, they will be willing to learn, and they will see the learning like an adventure, not a burden, like a way of living. But then, of course, as I mentioned, that our generation, most many of us already, but also those who are a little bit younger, that they have not always very, very pleasant memories from their time at school. Then we should somehow reinvent this passion for learning. And if we think now where we are, you are already the experts, but if we think the situation globally, so it's a very, very big challenge. And then we succeeded with Millennium Goals, where I have been also guilty involved. So we succeeded to get almost every boy and girl almost to the school. But then if we think the frustration that if they not, after 4 years at school, feel that they have really learned something which is useful for them and for the society, so it's a double burden, because they have thought earlier that this is the way how to do. And we, the Finns, we have one very positive experience, what we can tell, and it is that when we have invested in education, both the education of the girls and the boys, so it has been very fruitful for these individuals, but it has been fruitful also for our GDP, our society, and it has been based for the international competition. Even people said that the Nordic Welfare Society cannot be competitive with some other countries. I don't make by name the comparison. But we have noticed that that's possible because the modern society of the sustainable development will success as well as every one of the members of the society can be active, can feel to be the part of the society, and can get also more education after this basement of the education they have got as a young one. So I say this very, very shortly. So the SDGs, the certain kind of the decent life in the future for the becoming generations is very much based on the fact that people will get a good education. And the 3 first goals of the SDGs, they were especially the demands requested by the Global South. So no poverty, no hunger, and then health and education. That was that part with what they said always, that these are the most important for the global social justice, and I fully agree. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and Jari, Rector Jari Niemelä, would you like to continue?
Thank you. Thank you very much. I fully agree with the previous presentation about the consequences and results of this situation, which was portrayed up here a few moments ago. Perhaps what I've been thinking about the situation is, and if we want to use one word, the one word I would use to describe the situation is inequality. So increasing inequality, which results from what you just showed here. And inequality both at the national level, as we saw huge differences between countries, but also at individual level. So different individuals having different opportunities and possibilities to learn and to enjoy education. So this then results in lost opportunities. I mean, both at national level, we lose the potential and the capacity of countries, whole nations, because they don't have good enough education. And it also means lost opportunity at the personal level. So people who don't get proper education lose, in a sense. And as we know that education and the resulting research is very important for, again, the big challenges you showed here, for solving the big challenges, we are really not able to solve the challenges if we don't have the education, the research, and the innovations to do that. So I think the whole, in a sense, the future of our Earth and humankind is clearly dependent on education. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Professor Marilena Laakso from Jyväskylä.
Thank you so much. We have heard such an excellent two presentations that I don't know whether there is anything to add. I was thinking exactly the same things as the previous presenter, that of course, as we heard in the presentation of in the Hannele Niemis, the skills, it's of course a very important thing, the learning and math skills, but as we know, education is the whole basis of the societies, of stable societies, and the basis for individual well-being, for sustainable economics, and so on. So when we keep on facing this crisis in education, we keep on seeing these human catastrophic situations, and for example, people, immigration, people living in very catastrophical situations throughout their childhood and youth, and even adulthood. So I think exactly the same, that when we think those 17 global sustainable goals, the goal number 4 is a key solution for each and every one of them. So it is the starting point where we should concentrate. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Professor Neittamäki.
Yes, I am sure that there are more and more crises if such development will continue. If it continues like that, we will have 1 billion people in future, and half of them are in Africa, close to Europe. And it is good that the European Union will start a special program to help African countries. And at the end, we have some solution part, and we can continue like that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And Professor Lavonen.
So I agree that quite many important topics have already been said, but I just try to recall what important international organizations have said about this topic we are discussing. So UNESCO, OECD, European Union, for example. So what should we learn and why we should learn that? They have analyzed since mid-1950s. 1995, I think, was one of the first analyses. So in answers, they have given idea that everybody should have a good life. I think that is very important for personal level, so the well-being and health. And then the societies, so the societies should be making progress, and there should be democracy and good behavior among people. And then also the global dimension, like the climate change and this kind of things. So we should learn things in order to have, in those all 3 levels, good conditions. And there's another question, what are the competencies, but maybe we come later to that question.
Thank you. And Professor Lyytinen.
So I wanted to tell a little bit at the top of what we have learned from the perspective I have on the basis of the long experience of being connected to Africa. One of the most important ways we learn knowledge is reading, literacy. And if we have no skill to read, it's very difficult to survive in the future world. Climate change, everything is affecting, first of all, Africa and so on. So we had to be taken realistic goals. Finland may be one of the best country to focus on reading acquisition, supporting reading acquisition. As a person from the university, I also believe that we have to emphasize the evidence-based approach. Everything we do had to really have an effect, and it should have made in cost-effective ways. And this 40 years of reading research has motivated me to say that we can do it. And this can happen if we can give teacher to everybody's hand who needs this type of support. So also teachers need help. They had to learn how to give the optimal phonics instruction for teaching children to read in Africa, where we have many countries where none, practically none, learns the very easy to learn writing, which is very much like Finnish. So even the ekapeli, which we use in Finland, could be used for instructing reading there. But of course they had to have also words which are representing their own language. And this is the correct way to go. First the language children speak, and then later on English and so on.
Thank you so much for your comments and those ideas where I can find the same basic message that in Finland we have learned to do something, we have some tools in which way we can then also contribute to this learning crisis. But then my question is how universities can take their role. What does that mean in universities and higher education? When we made this report I shortly mentioned, we recognized that there wasn't so much strategic plans for education learning crisis viewpoint. There could be sustainable development, but education, when we ask what you are doing, there were projects, but they were some projects, they were then ending after the funding, after then it was gone. So my question is that can universities really do more what we are doing at that moment? And what does that mean in our higher education? Universities, in traditional universities, certainly also universities of applied sciences, but here mainly are people now coming from our those comprehensive universities. So I would like to raise this question to panelists. What universities could do or should do? President Halonen.
If I start, when I know the least, not so much than the others, these are experts in education, I will say only that when I have been chairing now the board of Helsinki University 2 years, and so we have been about at the same time, but Jari has been much longer time in the service of the Helsinki University. So I have noticed that sustainable development has, how could I say, it's very well accepted, and it's in all faculties, and people are very interested in that. But then when it comes to other subjects, what I consider very important from my previous experiences is that we should learn that how to spread, if not export, our educational skills. That's one thing. And then another one in our own country, but also wider. What should we do for the lifelong learning? So I have heard many times sentences which start with but. And then I say that but we have anyway to do this. And this is concerning our own country. We should be open for the new ideas that how we can see the lifelong learning, and with all these different kind of the students and requests and demands and wishes, what both they have and also the labor market, the business community and many others have. And then this is one, and this is a very big challenge already. And we know that money is not growing in the trees, not even in the Finnish forestry too much. So it has been always the shortage of the money, and so the universities have wanted to get more money for the new targets. And so that's one point. The second point has been that we have had an adult education quite much separated, divided into different sectors in society, not all in university. And when the ministers and ministry have hoped that we could get on more exams and more concrete results from the universities, so they have not been too much interested for those who are after their first graduation trying to get a new one and so on. That you don't see it in statistics, if I put it that way. And so that has been also the problem, that how to count how effective these autonomous universities are. And so the third point is that I have heard many warnings, also by Hannele herself, that it's dangerous to try to export education systems as such when the countries are very different. Perhaps it's not only corruption, it can be the broader, the good governance, how it's working, how the other sectors of the society is working. And it can easily happen that if you just try to take a package from the education and put in the new state, new system, so it doesn't work. And now we have a great work to do that, what we can really give, what is our help. But another way around, we don't reach sustainable development even to our own country if we don't see the global challenges, because this is just one planet, and we need to do it together in order to get also something for ourselves. And so I think that this is one of the issues. And there are also quite many countries with good faith or sometimes with a good knowledge in business who want to get just a label. This is the famous Finnish system. And we are in that way the consumer-oriented, that we don't want to give anything such kind of the product what we cannot guarantee that it will be good also for the longer use. And now these experts, I think they might tell more that why it's so difficult sometimes to respond these requests. Now they are ready and say that I didn't know anything. Okay, fine.
Who would take the next?
Thank you. We decided to proceed in order. So thank you very much. I fully agree with the chair of our board about how important sustainability and responsibility is at the University of Helsinki. Now we are preparing our new strategy, and sustainability issues will really be a cross-cutting issue covering everything we do. Research, teaching, but also our own operations. So how do we make a big operation of 40,000 people, 32,000 students and 8,000 staff members? How do you make such an operation more sustainable? That's one big issue. Then you combine that with internationalization, which will also be a cross-cutting issue. Then sustainability, responsibility, internationalization, we are starting to approach these kinds of things, especially in the global south. I should also mention that we have already established an institute called Helsinki Institute of Sustainability Science, which has 4 themes, and one of the themes is Global South, research and education in Global South. This is a fairly big operation because it's one of our profiling actions funded by the Academy of Finland by more than 6 million euros. So I'm quite confident that we are going to get good things done. Now approaching Global South, then I think we really need to take our global responsibility seriously. We put very much hope on Finland's government's Africa strategy thinking. I have been talking to several ministers that when they start preparing it, make sure that universities are involved in the preparation, because research and education must be in the Africa strategy. So hopefully when they will start after the EU presidency, nothing happens this autumn, we will be invited to be involved in the preparation. Finally, we are concretely right now negotiating a bilateral agreement with the University of Nairobi in Kenya, because we really want to make concrete steps in our global responsibility, not just talking about it, but doing things. And one of the issues that has been discussed is teacher education in this bilateral collaboration. So, I mean, there are things happening, but I fully agree with Hannele that so far they have probably been individual projects here and there. But now we are really trying to take a holistic view on it. And for instance, this strategic partnership with Nairobi is really at the highest level. It's between universities, not between research groups or anything like that, but it's at a higher strategic level. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent news, indeed. Yeah, and Maria-Leena, you would like to continue?
Yes, thank you. If we proceed in order, then it's my turn. Yes, I think that our university, University of Jyväskylä, has been a very strong actor in the field of global responsibility. We have coordinated many international development projects in Africa and in other countries, and I think it's due to that we are very strong emphasis on education. We have the strong special education field, the biggest in volume in Finland, and we have been for many years very active in that area, and also in teacher education and reading, as we will probably hear soon more of this. So I think there are lots have been done, and if we think what is the university's role, of course it's through its two main tasks, through teaching and through research. And similarly, as the rector of University of Helsinki mentioned, we have just finished our strategy project in University of Jyväskylä, and in that project we have tried to make it very clear the sustainable and responsible issues throughout the strategy. We have 5 big strategic development programs, and we have now analyzed all the goals in these 5 development programs for research, education, campus development, university community, and digitalization, and looked all those tens of the goals, which SDG goals they are trying to reach. And we are doing now the same. We are in the middle of curricular process, so we are also implementing the same strategy for our study courses. So I think there are a lot of going on in universities, but they are a little bit spread out, so we don't know the kind of the holistic view. So we want to make it more visible to us ourselves and outwards, and what I think is what is the fact that we need to do more is to cooperate more. That it's we as single universities, we can do a lot, but it doesn't bear significant results if we don't work together with NGOs and with other universities, and especially with the universities building these bilateral strategic partnerships with universities abroad, which also the University of Jyväskylä is very actively doing. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Yes, I know one university, University of Berkeley, which has really in strategy to solve some global problems in education and other areas. And that is it would be nice to evaluate various universities in Europe and other area that I think that 1 or 2% of university has that in the program. But in faculty level, in information technology, we have done something because we have funding of Academy of Finland about platforms, platform value now. And there we have studied systematically what digitalization means for human being worldwide. And I will speak later a little bit about that.
Yeah, many thanks.
So there was good analysis from the university point of view at the strategic level. So I would like to analyze shortly from the research group point of view. So I totally accept the general aims of the universities. They are related to the research and responsibility for societies and high quality teaching. And I can see that I can follow these strategic important aims through making collaboration with the countries, developing countries, or countries which has recently been developing countries. I have quite recently good, like long-term experience with some Latin American countries and the African countries like South Africa. And from the research point of view, I think it's very important for the researchers also in the educational sciences to have some kind of outcomes from the research that are independent of the context. And in my project, for example, in the teacher education, in the Johannesburg area, in the Soweto campus, we have been looking for student-teachers engagement during the teaching practice. We have been looking for their learning and many other things. And it's quite amazing how independent of the context, some basic, for example, the engagement is quite similar. And what the student teachers are able to learn during the teaching practice. So for individual research group, it's really important to have that kind of connections and learn deeply from the basic phenomena in the field of education.
Yes, thank you.
So being almost 100 years old, one has had an opportunity to collect evidence concerning what is effective, what university can do. The first attempt went to train master students of African people, which ended up to relatively good results if we take into account where they ended up. Two of them ended up to be the Minister of Education in their country. It is quite good result. The second attempt was what is in the order? We trained 12 doctoral students in Africa. They are in 4 different countries, and now they are leading a center in Zambia, which is able to do what we earlier did. We made the research there for finding how well we can help them and find evidence-based approach. They can do it now because they have been dedicated to do experimental research, intervention-related research. What seems to be least effective, which I have also been involved, is going there and teaching teachers there, teaching people there. What happens is that some elite people go to teach some elite teachers there, and it doesn't end up to any big influence because it is so limited. The effect is so limited that this traditional approach, I don't believe that this is the most effective one. All these other approaches are more effective.
Yeah, thank you, President Halonen.
Yeah, I would. I know that we have agreed that you are the chair, but I think that if I can, I was expecting to get on also the other one. When we have at the same time this lifelong learning challenge, and this is also in Finland. Even we have so good skills concerning the younger ones, but we cannot eliminate the older ones. We will live quite a long time, I promise. And so when the society cannot work, if the older generations are lagging behind and perhaps being very much hesitating or even how could I say, not very progressive for the new ideas. So I think that we should take this at the same time, because the difference between our generation and the younger generations in Finland is much more than what it is in many other countries. So how do you see also the possibilities of the universities to help in lifelong learning idea in developing countries or in middle class countries, so that they will also to see that they are one community, or in the families that they could feel that everybody can learn and can do. I hope so that you are not against this extra question.
Yeah, that's very important question, because I think that it's so important for labor market in developing countries. It's important in our country that how to retrain, learn more, and get those skills needed in our future societies, and even at recent society here in Finland. But I think that the need of this kind of lifelong learning is burning in many of those developing countries. So that it was so serious question that how to get lifelong learning, how to integrate that also to university education. What I hear when writing this report was that universities, there was researchers, there was teachers, but there was also the message that if I go to some development project, it takes a lot of time, it's out of my research career, it's not rewarding me, and I lose some opportunities. And then I think that there was something in the middle of universities, that even though every teacher and professor see the value, but then there are quite many obstacles, personal obstacles, but also funding obstacles, and also some kind of career obstacles. So I don't know how you could solve these problems so that we could have more some kind of passion to do also this kind of work. Jari Lavonen described in an excellent way how to connect research, also the work what is done in South Africa. But Maria-Leena, you have the next speech.
Yes, I just started wondering this question of lifelong learning. So I think it's a little bit same as Heikki Lyytinen already mentioned, that when I interviewed our staff members who have been long involved in this development cooperation work, they said that the successful project has always been the ones where they have educated local staff members. For example, in this very moment, 3 of our experts are in Namibia working together with 5 doctors, which were doctors from the University of Jyväskylä, who has there built now the learning societies, and they deliver the e-learning materials that has been developed in e-tail Africa project, and kind of give support for these doctors who themselves work there and build the societies and educate the university staff and the administrative people and so on. So they are adults and grown-ups there who will then be part of this learning these new tools, use these new tools. So I think this is the only kind of sustainable way that it is a long-lasting project, and it means very intensive cooperation and for this capacity building, so that we educate the doctors who then know their own circumstances and know their own policies and social issues in that country, and they are effective in also delivering this lifelong learning. This is what I believe.
Thank you. And Jari Lovonen.
So I'm sure this is very important issue, how to support lifelong learning in a sustainable way that we really get some long-lasting outcomes. So maybe I can a little bit elaborate the question from the point of view of my own experience. It's very difficult to say in general. So we have I think the long term is important. Long-term project with the Peruvian teachers. So it takes some five years altogether, and start with the capacity building of the teacher educators at 10 universities in all around Peru. And it was really important to first become familiar with the context. So because Peru is really multicultural context, there are different background people, and how to take that into account, and what is the kind of practices they are following, and what is the research outcomes telling about the outcomes of the practices. For example, the Peru was the second last in the reading in the Hannele's slide. So, but then the co-planning is really important. How to together with the local professors and local stakeholders plan project together, and how to take into account the local context, but also the research outcomes related to the capacity building or teachers' professional learning. Some kind of pilots are needed, and implementation of the pilots, also the kind of reporting and reflection. And what we find very important is the continuous quality work with this kind of project. So how to have a kind of enhancement-led quality processes inside the capacity building, and to learn from the mistakes and also success. And then kind of distribution of the outcomes, and how to support continuously the different areas in that country, and then how to combine research type of activities in this type of activity. So this is just experiences of mine, but I think this long term is important: reflection, quality, research orientation, and collaboration, goal setting together.
That's very important. So it takes a time, but then because our session has also limited time, I think it's now very important to have your audience reactions. Any questions or comments? Questions for panel members or other ways?
Kuuluu. Okei, kiitos. Nimeni on Lea Kuusilehto-Avale. Takana yliopistovuosia noin 12 ja nyt eläkkeellä, mutta yritysmaailmassa ja kolmannella sektorilla. Yliopistomaailmassa siihen aikaan, kun minä olin sillä työssä, oli sellaista mindsettiä, että we only participate and collaborate with the very best universities. Se ei ole se tie, jolla vastataan kysymykseen, jota tänä päivänä keskustellaan. Suomi on jo niin rikas maa, että minä olen viimeistä sukupolvea, joka muistaa, mitä oli olla köyhä. Minä olen syntynyt maalla köyhään, Suomen köyhimpään osaan, ja minä muistan, mitä oli olla köyhä. Minä opetin sitä yliopistossakin kansainvälisille opiskelijoilleni, kun he kuvittelivat tullensa aina rikkaaseen Suomeen opiskelemaan. Olen tullut sellaisen ajatukseen, että esittäisin, jotta tässä päästäisiin joskus systeemitason muutokseen, että yliopistot Suomessa esimerkiksi ja erityisesti ottaisivat liidin tässä asiassa siten, että te adoptoisitte tällaisen kummiyliopiston köyhistä maista, from fragile countries, broken societies, jotta meidän yliopistomme oppisivat uudestaan, mitä on olla köyhä. Vain silloin voi ymmärtää, mitä sillä pitäisi tehdä ja millaisia sosiaalisia innovaatioita pitäisi pystyä tekemään. Ja se olisi win-win tilanne. Ja tätä voisi sitten disseminoida koko Euroopan unionin alueelle. Ja nyt on todella hyvä hetki, koska Euroopan unionin komissio rahoittaa Afrikka-yhteistyötä muun muassa, ja siellä on näitä Broken Societies todella paljon. Eli esitän tällaista Academic, Social and Global Responsibility-mallia.
No niin, kiitos. Kuka ottaisi kopin? Jari
Excuse me, can I just interrupt briefly? We still have people in the audience who don't speak Finnish, so if you wouldn't mind just continuing in English, please. Sorry about that. I translated the question briefly here, so that should be okay to continue. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, this is a very good question, and I can only answer on behalf of Helsinki University, but we have exactly that approach. In Europe and let's say in the Western world, broadly speaking, we try to collaborate with the best universities. And we have, our strategy now is to have bilateral agreements with the really best universities in Europe. For instance, we just agreed with the University of Edinburgh, which is up there in rankings. But in many other parts of the world, we try to do exactly what you say. And Nairobi is one example of that. Of course, Nairobi in the African context is a good university. But compared to Western Europe, it's at somewhat lower level. But in addition to Kenya, we are now talking about collaboration in this context, perhaps a tripartite collaboration with the National University of Somalia. Because at the Somalia University there are lots of teachers and professors who have been educated in Finland. And actually we had a delegation in Nairobi a few months ago, and actually they talked to the Somali colleagues in Finnish in Kenya. So that's one possibility, to have a collaboration where we are one part of the collaboration group, and Kenya plus Somalia, so that we also try to get the universities over there collaborating more intensively.
So I fully agree that it could be good for the Finns to remember that we have not always been rich. And in the matter of fact, even today, the universities are not very rich. But when we are speaking about the people who are coming to the university, very often those who come from the different countries to Finland to study, or those who have been already, for instance, asylum seekers and then started to live here, they have the feeling that they only have these problems. I understand the difficulties to coming from the different culture, the different background and so on, but every now and then I have also told to them that there is the poverty in Finland, in the matter of fact, even increasing poverty. Not in the same way poverty was in Somalia, for instance, but anyway. So to see that this is not elite speaking to each other. It's we are of course very benefited that we have these possibilities to study, to work at the university, but also to think that what could be done in this very big part of the global population who cannot see in their lifetime such kind of the prosperity what we have today, and this demands a different kind of the approach to see what are the necessity. But it is already the learning to read and write and mathematics, and to be curious, to be somehow realistically hopeful, and to see the possibilities in their own circumstances. And I think this can be one area where the universities and those who are working in the developing countries, and many of you might be also have the same the both experiences, but not always. But to do it more to the closer cooperation, and that's why I welcome very warmly that now you have made the first program also concerning the education, how to take it, and so what I would say in order to encouraging the Finns is that if we don't do it, somebody else do it, and not with the better possibilities or the better experiences and the talents than we. So let's leave the Finnish modesty and think that yes, we can if we want.
Yes.
And to go together to work. Okay.
Excellent. So we can do that. So then next question from the audience. Yeah, it's over there. There and then, because yes.
Sorry,
please.
Reggie Rusan. How can Finns leverage technology to match the scale that's necessary to be a strong leader in the global education crisis?
So,
do you want to take a few questions?
Right. I think that this technology is something what was also in our discussion theme, that in which way Finnish researchers or universities and technology could give some answers those big challenges. And I'm sure that Heikki at least would like to start to answer this question.
So I feel that this is absolutely the only believable.
Techniques. Little more voice, I think. Yeah, maybe that's better.
I believe that technology is the
It's not on now.
It's the only believable, realistic way to really help children in Africa, for example. The problems are not in big cities, but in rural area. And the absolutely only way to let them to learn is to give a teacher to their hands. It can be in these phones they own. Most families own the phones. So like reading skill can be learned this way, and we have documented in many scientific papers. It happens, and what is most interesting is that they can teach also their parents who are not reading, which is a surprising thing. And we are just publishing a paper which documents how children teach their parents or motivated their parents to use the same way they learn to read. And this, of course, can happen if they have all the facilities. They have these cheap phones, which are quite enough for that, and so on. So when we are working with the universities in Africa, we are motivating them to take into account that they have also this very poor area in the rural part of the countries, like we had 100 years ago, and they need help. And now, what was a big surprise to me, that when I had an article in Helsingin Sanomat, many internet operators approached me telling that they wanted to help in mediating this in rural Africa. So having stations, movable stations, how to get the internet connection there so that they can get the guidance they need for using the game. And this is something which will be an effective way to help children in rural Africa.
And then Pekka Neittamäki.
Yes, thank you. My UNESCO share is digital service platforms in education and healthcare. And we are developing such system that we can have a working title Pocket School. So that everybody could have in future a school in their pocket and using mobile phones. And the contents comes from the server. And practically such a global pocket school can be global. You know how Google is working. It is a little bit similar idea, but we hope that the idea comes from Finland in the future. But the technology is quite ready. And just we had another event here, and Nokia people were there, and they just told that how they support this network building in African countries as well. In few years, they will have a network everywhere in Africa as well.
Yeah, I think that this technology is essential part of these solutions. It's not only solution. We need teachers, we need human beings who are giving teaching, learning, high quality teaching, but still I think that these technology applications can be one very important solution. And that is also in UNESCO. I think that there are quite many reports where are exploring just now how to use more technology in schools, in rural areas, how to opportunities we will have when we are using digitalization in different forms. So I think that that's a very good question, and thank you for that. And also I can see that 2030, it's so soon in front of us. So if we just think that then we educate teachers, and then we educate some adult people, and then we do something. Everything is important, but it takes a time. I think that we have to integrate these different approaches together. But there was quite many questions already. Please.
Thank you. My name is Satu Järvinen. I think my expertise is in education and Africa. Might be a bit unfair. We have university representatives, and my question will be related to vocational education and training. But I think it's mostly fair because we have already combined global education crisis and discussed basic education and so forth. But when we look at emerging countries, especially the African continent, the education crisis is naturally on all levels. It's in early childhood education, it's in basic education, it's in adult education, lifelong learning. But by far, the largest and biggest challenge is in vocational education and training, and not just formal vocational education and training, but technical and vocational skills development to provide people with the skills they need to lead better lives, meaning just the skills they need for lives, lifelong learning, and as President Halonen mentioned it's 70% of the continent's population. So the topic here is how Finnish universities could solve, but my question will still be about what can we do to actually contribute to the biggest, weakest, and largest challenge that the African continent faces. And as a side note, I think if we have contributors to developing the Finnish African strategy, I think it's a good idea to involve our excellent vocational schools in that job. But throwing the ball to you, TVET, vocational education and training, what can we do in that regard? Thank you.
That's very important question. Because we have limited time, I think that we collect now those questions what maybe are already in the audience. I think that there was quite many hands, and then I give floor to panelists. I think that there was.
Hello, Antti Korhonen from XEDU, the EdTech Startup Accelerator. So about the collaboration between researchers and startups and growth companies, how can the universities make that even stronger? Because if we look now, for example, a Grapho game, Heikki Lyytinen's invention, so the scaling up internationally is happening through a Clanet. And if we think about the research that, for example, at the University of Turku, Eduten, and Ville platform. So now the commercialization and scaling up is happening through Eduten. So I think that we should work to more on kind of collaboration and kind of exchanging ideas between the startups and growth companies and university researchers. So how can the universities work together with startups more?
Okay. Let's take still one question, and then I give floor to panelists.
Thank you very much. My name is Päivi Ahonen, and I am looking at the Sustainable Development Goal number 8, decent work and economic growth. And at the same time, when I'm looking at this, I'm remembering the young people these days from schools who go on Fridays on strikes because of the climate change problem. And I would like to ask if you think there is any connection between the economic growth, because at the same time there is a lot of discussion of how we should live consuming less, how we should travel not so much, even by air and car and so on. So that's my question. Thank you.
So there are now very serious questions in air, and how panelists could respond. There was vocational education, there was a question of this technology, and another which came to the decent work and economic growth. And President Halonen would like to start.
I'm also more full of the questions than the responses, if I put it that way. I will travel tomorrow to Geneva, and the subject there is to work together with the different kind of experts from different ILO countries, and that what is the future of the work, that how we could be prepared, educate people to something we don't know, unknown. And so, of course, this is what I started by saying, that what's our approach for learning for unknown is very important. I would say to the vocational training, and I just discussed today a little bit because of this trip with our minister, and he said, warmly thanking that the vocational trainers are always very much faster than we, the university people. That we can have always at least a 5 years plan before we can do something. And he said to me that I should say that hurry up. I said, if I dare, I will say. So I think so that what my experience is from the refugee camps and there. So really the vocational training is one of the issues, but also the issue where they said that they have got more satisfactory responses. The problem is, I think, that this kind of way that when we get the people, for instance, from the countries, the refugees or asylum seekers or other migrants, so we very easily think that the education they have already got, we don't perhaps say that it's next to nothing, but in a way we behave in a way that the education, what they have had already, is not fully used or understood that what to do. I think that this is one of the questions we have to see. Our university is not yet made the new strategy ready. We are working at that, and this could be as very often the panelists who don't know the answer, we say that this is a good question. But to see that this is more also the organizational question, that what is the cooperation in Finland between the different levels of the studies. And that means also that when we are working, struggling with this lifelong learning, so it means that we will have more and more the people who have a different kind of educational background already, and we should use that also in international cooperation. Then the question of the scaling. I don't mention one North African country we have discussed lately, and they couldn't somehow understand that we are only 5.5 million. So we cannot at once afford them for how many hundreds of places to come and study. So no, it's not enough. We should use everything for your country. And now the scaling will be one of the crucial issues, how to do it. Also with the digitalization, but also finding the crucial key persons and institutions and persons in the ministries, but universities, schools, and local governments, how to do this. I have not a ready-made answer, but I think that scaling is really one of the really big issues, and I have faced it earlier in health and social services, because scaling the services is one of the issues which many good countries have failed. So we try to find it. And then the decent work is really, it was not at all in the Millennium Goals. So the diplomats made a very fine, Kofi Annan and the others, they made a fantastic diplomatic surprise when they succeeded to get our Millennium Goals. And we have made all very much work in order to get it much better implemented what anybody could believe beforehand. But they forgot the work. There is no mention in decent work. We made it in the ILO's Globalization Commission 4 years afterwards. We sent it away, as we say in Finnish, heitettiin hiiva sisään pullan jälkeen. But it was successful still. And now it has been in decent work has been since the beginning in the Sustainable Development Goals. But now the next step is how to combine these two things. And I think that Europe could be more visible, but now I'm very happy that, for instance, in the so-called Center report in Europe, so the enterprises, the companies have been also taking their own responsibility. They are thinking what they could do, not only what we are requested from the universities or the governments, but that they have also their own duty. So not too good responses, but thank you very much for the good questions. And now you are the expert to answer.
With this fantastic introduction, I can state that I fully agree. Well, perhaps I will pick one of these questions, and it was about the startups. I mean, we had the luxury to visit Slush last week, and of course, it's a fantastic event for startups and young companies and so on. So many universities are present there as well. So I think, in a way, you already answered the question. I think there needs to be much more collaboration between universities, companies, especially the young ones, startups. And I'm quite sure that universities, even an old established university like Helsinki University, there's a huge amount of innovation potential in the university, in the research teaching that we do. The thing is to get it out from the research labs and rooms. Those innovations that are that we are able to commercialize, those innovations need to come out from there. So the big question for a university is, how do you encourage, how do you support innovation within the university, and how do you provide the needed funding for the early stages before they really take off? And I think, as you said, that there needs to be a lot of collaboration, lots of discussions between researchers, the university, the investors, and so on. It seems, I was quite surprised to learn from Slush last week that there's no lack of money. The world is full of money. It only needs to find the proper places where to go. And of course, I mean, we have all the universities and universities of applied science full of innovation in this country. We need to get that out from there.
So we are almost finding some solutions. Maria-Leena.
Yeah, I just want to say something relating to vocational education. So it is definitely so that it has been kind of divided, that the universities has more concentrated on basic education, and I very much admire the work which University of Applied Sciences have done in the field of vocational education. But I also know from the master programs, international master programs that we have, for example, in the University of Jyväskylä, many of our students from, for example, African countries, they have studied their own education systems there, also relating to vocational education. So I think that we can combine our forces there and act together. I know that you also do research, but we can add the strong research basis in universities. And I think in the bigger picture, how much we are doing different projects in developing countries, and we lack research in our actions. What is really working, why, and to whom, and delivered in which way. Although Heikki said from his long experience that he already knows what works and what doesn't, but in the big picture, I think what is definitely needed there in vocational education, basic education, early childhood education, lifelong learning, we need a research-based practices, and there we have this problem that, for example, the very important instrument, Heikki project, they don't allow us to do research, and that is one very critical obstacle for universities to act more intensively in these areas. And I very much applaud the cooperation between applied universities and universities.
Great. Yes. Who would respond?
So I just continue that we have had in the Finnish National Teacher Education Forum 2 meetings related to the international collaboration and export of education. And it's very clear that applied universities are doing very good work in this field, and traditional universities are not able. So we have been discussing why is this happening, and one important reason is the funding model, as already mentioned, that the university funding model is emphasizing the research and educating of masters here. And applied universities have more flexibility in allocating the working time to the development type of projects, so the research outcomes is not weighted from their side, but from our side it is. So it's a kind of difficulty to overcome this funding model, at least we feel so, and based on the discussions. The technology is interesting, and in the projects I have been collaborating, so it has been an important part of the project, for example, how to learn those transversal competencies we have been already discussing, and how, for example, the robotics and coding are giving possibilities for learning those competencies. And companies are willing to finance that kind of tools for African schools, but somehow also the corruption makes sometimes it challenging. And what should be, I would like to emphasize that in Africa there are many very sophisticated way of using technology and mobile devices that doesn't exist in Finland. So actually in some part they are more expert in doing and using those tools than we are. So we are also learning when we are collaborating with other societies.
So this question associated to startups. Universities are training and studying, finding innovations which could help. They are not able to distribute the products. It is startups and this type of commercial players who can do it. And the problem there is, and when we are speaking about helping children in Africa, for example, in developing countries, those who have developed the innovations are not very happy to give it to startups by saying, let's sell it there, because they cannot pay. So the problem is the products have to be such that the startups can collect the money they need for helping also African kids without collecting any profits. And this is the model. It took a long time to develop this model, how it can be done. And we ended up to this model which was mentioned. And I believe this type of thing works. But then the innovation has to be such that this startup can survive. And they can survive only if they can collect money from somewhere else, but not in poor countries.
So I'm now a little worried about time, and so many issues are on our table. So now I think that if there is any burning question from the audience, you have, yes, yeah, please, very quick, yeah.
There's the fire on this road.
Thanks very much for the panelists. I'm Hanna Lasut. I work in education global practice of the World Bank. I was actually very happy to hear this afternoon, I think it was afternoon already, one idea of how to go on scale. And please, presenters, correct me if I'm wrongly interpreting. There is a guidance and counseling program. I think the Finnish Church Aid has been the one who has been coming up with the idea. And, for example, a government of Cambodia really thought this is a good idea, and they are now probably even thinking of partnering with others, how to get the certification and such things. I did not get the chance also ask within that small group session that why on earth there wasn't any mention of multilaterals. We've spoken a little bit about the World Bank today. There are also the regional banks. As an example, also maybe thinking of other stakeholders. So I think it's very, very important for a country like Finland really to navigate those countries that you work with and look at the other actors there. And I'm sure that we have also enough people in various organizations who can help to navigate. Some of it can happen in just really introducing people to each other so that they can start talking and really thinking. So I think it's good to really look at solutions for scaling up. I think the bank also is very much looking at those. We have a lot of pilots, let's say in the inclusive education, how to go on scale. And so let's talk about this more.
Just one word that was missing, I think, today in the panel, but I'll let you think further. And that is the coefficients of different sustainable development goals, how they influence each other. It's not always straightforward. And the Global Development Report really emphasized that. Another issue is co-creation of knowledge. Our colleagues in several African universities are coming together in January discussing decolonizing knowledge. And the essential message to the so-called Western or Northern partners is we need to co-create knowledge and not impose our knowledge.
Thank you so much for those very important comments. And now I give last words to the panel. Unfortunately, I think that we have to even
can I just,
very short time conclude. Yeah.
Can I just very briefly follow up on the comments here, because also just to mention that the Heikki was criticized here, and we know that there is no research component in it, but we have also seen the value of bilateral partnerships funded through Heikki, and they have then later on been funded by the World Bank. We have University of Turku, we have the Bill Gates Foundation, we also have the World Bank funding Oulu University of Applied Science. So we have several examples of scaling up later, but I think for references, these bilateral partnerships are still important as well.
Yes, indeed. So I would give last words to the panel. And if you could say in 2 sentences what we can do more together. So we have now discussed that cooperation is important. I think that if you want, certainly you can say what we can do more, but I think that if we can put there also what we can do more together, maybe that is then something which leads for the future. Who would like to start? Is it now Jari Niemelä?
Collaboration and co-creation.
Oh, even 2 words, not 2 sentences. Great. Yeah, Pekka.
I think we must continue the discussion and maybe meet in one year and ask a new commissar from Brussels to discuss with us. But before that, we must have a plan what to do and how to help people. And I think we should create a small group to continue planning, and then we have already several universities here, and that could be the way.
Very good. Jari.
So I was trying to emphasize this collaboration, co-creation, but I was not successful. But I totally agree with that. In addition, the research orientation and quality work or quality culture in our works.
Yeah, Heikki.
I have been so happy seeing what has been written about the problems of capitalism during last weeks. I have had an opportunity to work with many private players, companies. In most countries where we have been working, we have always found someone from private industry who have wanted to help us. They understand that it's not only the profits they should collect, they can also do something good. And this is very helpful also for their own benefits in the future.
And Marja-Leena.
Yes, as I mentioned in the beginning, we have now had the Jyväskylä University strategy, where the responsibility and sustainability are there in the very core. What I'm now very much hoping is the kind of national strategy and the vision for us as a country as a whole, what we are willing to do and do that together.
And then President Halonen.
Yeah, I fully agree with the previous speakers that yes, cooperation, collaboration, both in Finland but also internationally. And I think that it's good feeling if you feel that that was just a start and you are still hungry. That was the idea, I think, what I guess. But then I will also say that the Finnish presidency of the European Union is over. But as much as we remember, there is one commissioner who has a special portfolio concerning Africa. Let's hijack her. Thank you.
Yeah. So I have seen today so much passion and so much also forward-looking attitudes, and I can see also some optimism, and I think that we can do much more together, just as you presented. And there was also a proposal that we should make some plan, we should maybe have more strategic approach nationally, also including international cooperation. But really important that if we could continue this kind of dialogue and discussion, so that has been excellent that now we have had opportunity to start this discussion, and hopefully we continue. So thank you for organizers who have given this platform for us, and thank you for our panelists, thank you for your contributions, and thank you for the audience. Many thanks and have a nice evening. There is still some nice program, I think so. Thank you.
Maybe can I briefly... Okay. Yeah, so in fact, we will continue discussions already tomorrow. And thank you so much to all the panel participants and the chair for taking time. We've heard some really good messages here about strategic partnerships taking place, also with universities in developing countries. We also hope that they will focus not only on all the SDGs, but particularly on solving the global learning crisis. For those of you who are heading towards the networking event, we start at 6 at Unionin kadun juhlahuoneisto. Warmly welcome, and to all the others, I wish you an enjoyable evening, and we reconvene tomorrow at 9:30 with the program There is Coffee from 9 onwards. Thank you.